So, hi everybody, it's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. This is the Explorers Group Coaching session. And as I've said umpteen times already, it's kind of morphed into a training program. I'm cool with that. But if you are watching this video for the very first time, do not be confused with this being labeled coaching, because this really isn't coaching. It seems like it's more training, but whatever. So, yeah. So we've now done 16 hours on this material in just these coaching sessions. So you guys have actually completed the equivalent of a 3-day training program as we've worked our way through this. And we've not gone in depth. Usually this gets taught in a very carefully mapped out, logical, thorough progression, and you work your way through each of the concepts and all that. We're jumping around. And so I'm okay with it being organic as long as you guys are getting something of benefit out of it and I'm not confusing anybody. So I have to put the burden on you. If you got a question, feel free to ask it. You want deeper insights into a particular thing we're talking about, ask for it, whatever. But, to take this very strange program and turn it into whatever it is that you guys want most from it. So with that, I do want to get back to the layer we were talking about last time around, and hopefully we'll be able to get into this last layer I wanted to go through. But last time around, were we talking about what happens if you're Outgrid Danger Zone when it comes to addictive processes and things like that?
Just starting, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So let's pick up where we left off. Now, I could and perhaps should show you this diagram instead, maybe this diagram instead, but I want you guys to get comfortable looking at the composite diagram. So right now we're talking about what happens when someone ends up outside of the red circle in that danger zone. And so one of the things that one of our colleagues many years ago did with the ChangeGrid is they used it for their doctoral dissertation, trying to study the addicted population and trying to see if they could predict what someone's addiction of choice might end up being. And remember last time around, I did say, and I think it's important to put this out there again, I don't think anyone goes out there and says, today I want to get addicted to something. I think, stuff happens and they might accidentally fall into something, or it might be a peer pressure kind of thing, or it might start off as something that's innocent enough, but it grows into being a real problematic situation. So, while we're going to be talking about different regions on the ChangeGrid, and we might even be talking about types of people, it's types of people purely as a concept, not as specific people we're talking about. That's my disclaimers. That's my little caveat. So let's get into it. If you are someone who spends a great deal of time in the Outgrid Danger Zone, tell me what's going on in your thought process. What's someone in the Outgrid Danger Zone thinking and believing and feeling and doing? Anybody throw anything out? What do you think happens out there?
Panic,
Panic would be very far upgrid.
upgrade.
I'm better than anyone else.
This is it. This is the
I've got the idea.
right, because think how they got there. These perceptions, they perceive their ability as being extremely high. So they're saying, bring on the worst challenges.
Oh, yeah.
I and only I can handle them. So there's a superhero kind of mindset that comes into play here. What else do you think happens when someone's in the Outgrid Danger Zone?
Nobody can tell me what to do.
No one can tell me what to do. They're very difficult. On the Tuesday and Thursday calls with the Circle of Brilliance, we're talking about how coachable these people are, and we can tell you they might run companies, but we get involved with these companies because the company is having some very serious problems. You have no idea how often the problem ends up being the person who hired us. So you have to come along, but they're not particularly coachable or trainable. They're not very, what do we say, astute when it comes to human interactions, things like that. This is the domain of the narcissist. So all kinds of stuff is going on out here. So, but think about this. For them to actually be out here and live out here, they have to have enough of a pattern in these kinds of behaviors that we start to notice what those behaviors happen to be. And so this is someone who's presenting themselves as being very capable to tackle, handle, and succeed in very, very difficult tests. I don't think it'd be off the mark to say that they have achieved a certain level of success, even though they have whatever these problems are that goes along with it. In fact, they might have even achieved far greater success than the average person just because this mindset pushes them to keep taking the risk and stepping up and doing it and doing it and doing it. So don't be at all surprised to see that there is a lot of evidence in each of these people's lives to show that they are one of these super people. They are one of these highly accomplished, highly whatever. We make the distinction, or we look at the subtleties, the nuances, and say, well, that's fine for a while, good for them. If they're right here on the ChangeGrid where I'm squiggling around coordinates 10, 10, where they are an amiable driven driver, all could be well. But once they shed that amiable tertiary energy, and now they're out here as a driven driver, can you feel that energetically this is a different situation that could become, that will be expressed in different ways and could be problematic? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So these people, though, just like anybody else, they got their insecurities. In fact, we do believe that people who are exhibiting any kind of narcissistic behavior as a consistent pattern in their life, we know that that narcissistic behavior is really a way of coping with doubts, insecurities, things like that. There's something else that's going on that could be dealt with. It tends to be beyond the skill set of most of us that are involved with ChangeGrid, but we do have plenty of clinical psychologists and other types of medical and mental health professionals that are certified. So maybe they can help that individual. For us, we'll give it the old college try, but then we kind of know that if we stay in a relationship with one of these narcissistic people, sooner or later they will turn on us. And when they do, they're going to blame us. They're not good at taking responsibility for what's going on.
So may
Now,
I ask a question?
sure.
So if they're that far outgrid,
Yep.
and as Anja described, that kind of self-centeredness aspect, and they have, their pattern of behavior is about driving, doing, and they're doing so at their own peril,
Yep.
right? So like endorphins kicked in. So how aware are they of those kinds of uh, uh, things that keep
Yeah.
them out there?
I
Like
would,
there seems to be a pattern of unawareness, and that's why they keep doing it. And even
well,
though
let
these
me ask
things
you
are
this
harmful,
question, Brian. Do you think it's unawareness or do you think it's more likely to be denial, or are we looking at progress along a continuum?
probably along a continuum.
Yeah, I would say the further
Yeah,
outgrid you go, the more we're going to start seeing that unawareness be there because it's been their pattern for so long. And because the pattern is an important defense mechanism for them, it's not at all surprising that they, if you exercise it long enough, it becomes a default way of operating. And
right.
so I don't know that the people that are this far out grid are all that aware of what's going on. But what I do know is that the people who may not be that far gone are surrounded by people who have called out their nonsense, who have challenged them and pointed things out. Now, did they
Well,
hear them or did they turn around and destroy them?
Destroyed them, probably.
And that's the thing. It's kind of like
um,
the dysfunctional person in general. Forget just narcissism. There's a lot of other forms of dysfunction that are even more prevalent than narcissism is. But their greatest fear is being exposed, being found out, being discovered, and labeled as being something less than the image that they're trying to project out there. And so, if you are someone that they see as a threat to them perpetuating their myth, the safest thing for them to do is to get rid of you.
Yeah.
And so
well,
that's what they'll do.
Pete,
They'll turn their back. Yeah, go ahead.
do you think that the fact that they are more likely to bring you in to fix things is more sort of proof that they don't get it, that they're the problem?
Exactly. In
Everybody
fact,
else is an idiot, and
yeah,
I'm
invariably They
Oh, and
bring us in because they want us to help everybody else realize that everybody else is the problem and that this leader is really doing just great.
Mm.
It works for people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we, again, all of us on the call that are backgrounds in consulting or any kind of therapy like that, very, very often the person who hires us ends up being the person who is at the core of whatever the problem actually happens to be. T, David, Brian, you guys have experience with this dynamic I'm describing. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Actually, right now.
Do tell,
Mm.
T, tell us a little bit about the dynamic that you're in the midst of.
Well, it was interesting when I first came, the individual said they wanted to have everybody know what they were doing and et cetera. And people wanted to get to know everybody. So I started with my usual thing and then tried to get tension management in, tried to get the other one resolved and finished, but that took an extra 6 months. So now I'm here trying to do tension management and moving from over 55 down to 32 activities. And all the time I'm thinking, gosh, I didn't follow the red, green, yellow, blue, red,
Yeah, that's right.
path. And I got it down to 32. Asked the individual to send it out. I went over it as best I could in the time frame with her staff and with the board. And she came back and answered, I don't want this sent out. If you want it sent out, you can, but they won't understand it.
oh,
Wow.
And honestly, I even went through Chat GPT
Yeah.
What?
to get
To
get
try to
them.
simplify the
Who
activities.
you were
Yes.
listening to?
And then I went back to her and I said, help me understand this. This is what you wanted. Well, I know my people. You should know the audience too. And going on, and I'm thinking, God, I really blew it. I am really, really.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute.
Mm.
And then listening to all of you, and then she says, I'm tired of this. I don't want any more. Here's the rest of your money.
you're putting a light on me.
And then now I I had a meeting with the board chair and the individual. And she said, I said, oh, and the board chair said, well, send it to me. And why don't you send it out to all of everybody? Well, I keep thinking that, and it was then that I realized, I don't think anybody knows who's in charge.
Yeah, well,
And the individual expects me to, that it's my meetings. And I said, no, these are your meetings you are having with your people to have them understand they're not for me, they're for you.
right.
And then after listening to this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, when I saw the result, she finally did the report. I mean, did the ChangeGrid. And I'm looking at it way, way, way out in Outgrid, way down in Downgrid.
Yep, all along.
Majority of them. And T, I want to go over this with you because I need to give her feedback. I mean,
sure. Anytime you want. Yeah.
now I'm realizing she really doesn't perhaps want this exposed.
Oh, it's a threat to her.
And the thing is, she's good. And she is sick, I mean, physically, but she's good. And she needs some real change in training. And she should have been told. But I have to tell you, folks, this is, coming to me like, no, you're not really the total problem, Waldman.
No, you're just the exposer.
Right.
Yeah. And see, T, that's why I asked that question about the awareness part, because I remember, and T probably heard of this term. I never heard of it before. But when we were working with a social psychologist that was helping us here, working with all these high credential physicians and things, she mentioned a term called situational blindness.
Yes.
And then when you turn those letters around, the SB turns into BS, which is blame shifting, right? So blame shifting, there's no accountability in anything when you blame shift, because the problem is always something or someone else. And I
Yeah.
see this a lot when people have these high performing kinds of positions, especially when they're that far outgrid.
Yep,
That
absolutely.
the we is more I, and they'll take all the credit for the success of something, but
Mhm.
don't mind burning bridges and burning others to get there.
Yep.
It's a interesting phenomenon to watch it.
You know who is an expert at that? Bart Simpson.
Yeah.
Exactly, Bart Simpson. You're right. You're right. And it
I
makes you
didn't do it. I didn't do it.
No, it
Nobody
was like
saw me
that.
do
It
it
was
like
like
that.
that.
Nobody saw me do
Right,
it. Nobody
right.
could prove anything.
Very often, you guys will find this kind of fun, but some of these principles that we try to get across to corporations and executives and all that, you go watch these kind of cartoons and you find out they're trying to do the same thing. They're just trying to find a more creative way to get the same message across.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's like you wouldn't listen to us if we spoke to you like an adult. Maybe you'll listen to us if we give you a cartoon. It really is. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay. Anyway, so today we really want to talk a little bit about these choices that are made, or these things that someone accidentally falls into. So last time around, I said, well, everyone is going to have a type of alcohol of choice that they would go through. You guys remember what we said? The person in the Outgrid Danger Zone, what do they want?
Crystal.
They want Cristal. They want the top shelf stuff. They want whatever was marketed best, whatever is that kind of thing. So, yeah, the rarest of the rare. That's the kind of thing that they're really looking for. Why are they looking for that kind of stuff? Why do they make those choices?
Only the best, only the most unique, only the superhero drinks the best.
That's right. Only they deserve. They're entitled to have this kind of stuff. Exactly. So that's what their choice is. What drug do you think they choose?
I'm thinking the anesthetic that Prince and Michael Jackson took.
Cocaine.
Okay, cocaine for sure. But Anja, you're talking about what's the name of it?
Fantasy or something? Ecstasy. No, I don't.
Fentanyl?
No, it put them to, it helped, it made them free.
No, fentanyl is too cheap. They want something super expensive that's exclusive.
Right, some designer kind of thing.
Yeah.
LSD.
LSD.
Yeah, microdosing.
Well,
Microdosing, yeah, LSD microdosing. Right. And
That'd be
so,
expensive.
again, what we're doing is we're really just looking at how the person's mindset going into those kinds of behaviors can end up becoming a problem. So face it, anyone in the Outgrid Danger Zone who's achieved great success, or even this person at 1010, the amiable driven driver, they might celebrate by cracking open a bottle of wine. They might break open a box of the world's finest cigars. They might want to be celebrating in style. They're not addicted. They're not the problem, or the problem hasn't come yet. It's when they start to have their doubts, when the imposter phenomenon syndrome, you guys are aware of imposter phenomenon. Is that something you've all?
oh,
Yeah, the
Yes.
imposter phenomenon speaks to a pattern in very successful people, that their success is somehow or another not something they actually own, they actually deserve, but the matter of being in the right place at the right time, a matter of luck. And so they're always living in fear that people are going to find out that they're actually an imposter. And then they're going to, be looked at poorly, or whatever the case may be. And this cycle is something that's even present in kids. And I think, if you guys look at your own lives, you might find certain incidents where the imposter phenomenon was coming out. So I'll share one for myself. Early on in life, like probably most people, if I was given a term paper to do, I would always do it at the last possible moment. So, and I would crank it all out, and lo and behold, it would be really good. I'd get an A on the paper. The teacher would be giving me all this kind of praise. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking like, well, oh my God, I mean, I did this at the very last minute. So I dodged a bullet. Good for me. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I didn't do anything. It came, for whatever reasons, easy to me or whatever. I was always good at composing at the typewriter, and I'm not talking about a computer. You guys remember back in the days of having to use whiteout? So
Mhm.
I was typing my term paper for my first draft was my final draft. And I got away with it over and over and over again. And so my great fear was that they were going to find out that lo and behold, I hadn't done what it was that they think I had done. I hadn't put in that kind of time. I hadn't done that level of research. Somehow or another, I got away with it. And so this is one of the things that the imposter phenomenon will talk about, that people who have this wait till the last hour and then they pull a rabbit out of the hat, mix as many metaphors as you want, and they end up being celebrated when in reality they don't feel like they actually deserve it or they don't actually own it. But the patterns continue, and at a certain point in time, it becomes really kind of what do I say, a central part of how they behave. And now, when they get into corporations and they get promoted up and up and up the ladder, they're still always afraid that someone's going to find out they're an imposter. And so, that they can't own whatever their talents are, their gifts are, or whatever the case may be. That's a very basic explanation on one little angle of them. Anyone else with familiarity with imposter syndrome? You want to throw anything else out there?
In the winter session of college, my first year of college, 1970, I had some kind of art class, and we had to do an art project, humanities class. And I waited until the night before it was due, the end of the term, and my girlfriend and I walked to the supply store on campus, and I bought 4 colors of paint and a big canvas and a bunch of sticks. And we sat down in my dorm room, and I spent probably 2 or 3 hours dripping colors of paint onto a canvas like Jackson Pollock, because
Right.
and I just did it, and I let Mary do it. And now that got to cover that corner. No, can you leave some of the, I don't know. If you cover the whole canvas, and he'll think we really worked hard. I took it in the next afternoon. The professor, I thought he was going to shit his pants. He bought it from me for $50. And I have never done a piece of artwork since.
Wow. Well, there you go. So as either you were channeling your inner Pollock, or
I learned something about Jackson Pollock is what I did.
yeah, there you go.
And your
Wow.
professor.
It goes back to this. There's a lot of, we all have, art is a very subjective kind of a thing. So, but how often have you looked at something in a museum and said, that's a blue square? Why is it on the wall of this museum? And one time I said to someone who was like one of those art history people, I said, I could have done that. That's a red circle and a blue square.
But
I said,
you
I
didn't.
could have done that. And they said to me, yeah, but you didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, so what?
So, all right, well then.
I didn't sweep that corner either.
Yeah, because it was all about the corner. The real question, Tom, was why did the artist choose to leave that corner white? What statement were they trying to make? So people start to add meaning to any kind of stimuli they encounter, and then they start bestowing value upon it. And as they start to create deeper and deeper levels of meaning in their own mind about what they're looking at, they are increasing the value of that out there. So
Is anyone old enough to remember the guy in the mid 1960s who got himself a young chimpanzee and taught him how to throw paint on a canvas? And the chimpanzee just fell in love with the activity. And then the
yeah.
guy said he had painted them himself, and he ended up selling them for, in today's money, 50, 60, $70,000 a piece.
Isn't that crazy?
Remember that? Yeah. And then he came out, and then the art world said, oh my God, that makes it even better.
Yeah, well, and isn't that interesting? Because the story is going to add value to this whole thing. So, this is the whole point of it. If people are achieving, are being recognized and rewarded for things that they don't genuinely feel that they created, that they deserve, or whatever, that pattern sooner or later becomes this imposter phenomenon sort of thing. And it
Uh,
becomes really problematic when you start moving into corporate settings and things like that.
you
Somebody
know,
else's
and
money.
that imposter syndrome actually started, and I'll just share, it was with first graders.
Oh,
And
do tell.
when my sister was teaching, and all of these kids in the first grade started acting out, were afraid to try new things, etc. And she said, but they were so successful before, none of the parents could understand it. And she was really making them accountable and getting them to understand, but they were afraid to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was it, even though this was done in first grade.
Wow.
And one of them was one of my nephews, and her nephew, obviously. But it was the whole class practically.
Yep, yep. It's a
So the
very,
children were afraid and she discovered it? Is that what happened?
No, they were learning. They were doing very, very well, learning a lot of things. But when they got into her class, it was though they were afraid to learn that they weren't going to be the top person in their family.
Yep.
Because now they're with other kids who
Yep.
were smarter
Oh,
or just as smart.
Yep. And think about how this plays out when very, very bright kids in their senior year of high school, they've done well on the test, they've got accepted to really good colleges. Everyone's convinced them that they're somehow or another special. And then they arrive in that campus on the first day and they realize they're rather commonplace.
Mhm.
So it can really derail them because now they go like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? So they're meeting people with different backgrounds, and I don't know, they're necessarily smart or whatever, but they have something that the other person or the person who's questioning their own value is going like, see, I don't have that. I don't have that. I didn't do that. I didn't whatever. So anyway, imposter phenomenon is a very interesting thing to look at. There is a book with that very name that goes back, I think, to the 1980s or 1990s. I forget the person's name who wrote it. Imposter
Not
phenomenon.
that long ago, T.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, I remember it's a bluish kind of cover. Well, who knows? Anyway, imposter phenomenon. It's out there. Okay. Anyway, so their drug of choice tends to be cocaine. Tends to be something. The keyword is expensive. The keyword is exclusive. So the more danger that's involved in getting something, the more risk that's involved in having it, holding it, taking it, whatever, that all appeals to this energy. Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
Now, while we talk a lot about substance addictions and primarily about alcohol and various drugs, the truth is there are far more process addictions than there are substance addictions. So, a process addiction is a behavior that could actually be a good thing for someone to do, but it gets taken to an extreme. So certain things that might be good for your health, taken to an extreme, becomes an addiction and becomes a problem. Or maybe something that people are doing for a little bit of fun and enjoyment, it can end up becoming a bit of a problem. And so, can you guys think of any kind of process addictions? And as you think about them, what might be out here? Yep.
I I think it's those people who don't want to delegate, because they I'm the only one who can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the best. If anybody else learns it, then they might be better than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's exclusive versus inclusive.
So they become addicted to power. They become addicted to whatever that fame
Being,
part of things
being
is,
the guru, being the guru.
being the guru, um, feeling as though, well, even in the corporations we've all worked with, if they aren't able to attract employees who can do what needs to be done just as well, if not better than they're doing it, then they're limiting their growth because I don't care how good someone is at something, it takes time for them to do it. And that means that time's not available for other things that they need to be doing. So sometimes they won't delegate because, by the way, we see a lot of that in family owned businesses that are transitioning to the next generation. Mom and dad have to let go of some authority in order for the kids to step up to the plate and demonstrate that they know exactly what to do and how to do it. So there is this holding on to stuff that is a pattern, and it does become addictive at a certain place, at a certain point in time.
I
What else?
think I had that as an athlete, right? Because I was kind of athlete that didn't have an off season. Like I just didn't believe in it because for me, I didn't want to just win, like a very competitive family. So for me, I didn't want to win. I wanted to kick your ass.
All right. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Like
Yep.
winning
Set
wasn't
the new
good enough.
records. Yeah, it's got to be world record performances.
Exactly. But that, I'm only 53, so that kind of stuck with me. And like when I would see someone kicking the football or soccer as it's called in the States, I only had one level. It was either 100% or I didn't want to play. But then, when you're getting older like that, the recovery process is a lot
Absolutely.
longer.
Right. But in your mind, you're still a 20 some odd year old star
Exactly.
athlete.
So I
Yeah.
had
So
to
that's
learn
part of it
how
too.
to kind of
And
cut back on that.
I think a lot of sports reinforce it as well. I'm not a giant fan of American football, but I do know that quarterbacks seem to get a whole lot of accolades, and don't they spend the least amount of time on the field of anybody? Don't they? I just don't get it. It's kind of like it's a team sport. So why are we putting one player or one type of player on a very different, pedestal for all that?
And
So
imagine the mindset of those kinds of things, right? So like the orthopedic surgeons say American football to like take that kind of impact or to want to hit someone, they say
mhm.
that's the equivalent of being in a car crash a day.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm imagining like how do you have to psych yourself up for that, right? And
right.
so again, that can become the pattern in other areas of life quite easily. I
Yep,
think that's
yep,
what happened to me that I had to learn to. That's where martial arts helped me to calm down.
yep. Well, and it's interesting then because if there's, the one thing that I'll just throw out that they find themselves very much getting addicted to is gambling.
Mm,
And so gambling very much on sporting events, very much on boxing.
hmm
So they want these real fights to happen because that's matching where their mind is as well. So is there anything that is a greater demonstration of someone's superiority than direct hand-on-hand combat between two guys
hmm
or two people, as case may be? So it resonates with that energy, and then they can make the bet on the boxing match or on the horse race or whatever. Because again, who owns the horses? You think upgrade people own horses? Downgrid people own horses?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you might have a horse for recreation, but those racing horses,
Those are, yeah.
they're out here. This is what's really going on. And again, I don't want everyone to or anyone to think that as we describe outgrid behavior that it's all negative. It's not. There's really a decent amount of space here for that outgrid behavior, that driven driver to express themselves in very positive ways, very positive. They just can't lose that amiable tertiary energy. That's what's keeping them humble. That's what's keeping them grounded. They lose that. Now they're out here in the danger zone. And now um, you know, it's just crazy fights.
What does that balance look like of keeping it there so where it does not become, deleterious to yourself and to others? Because I know for me, that's why I said martial arts is this, the Sifu master in martial arts used to always say to me, there is no there to get to.
Right.
You're busy trying to get to the black belt, and once you get to that black belt, there's another
Yeah. Yeah.
level that you
Yeah.
can get
Endless
to.
number of degrees. Yep. Yep.
Right. And so it's like there stop trying to get there and you'll be okay.
Right. Be where you
It
are and fine. Continue your
but it
practice.
took so many years to get that. I can hear it, but the practice of that in daily
Mhm.
experience is something totally different. And it took
Yeah.
years
Well,
to get to that
I
point.
I think it also has to do with, again, we're talking about the amiable energy in the tertiary position. So they're still a driven driver, make no mistake about it. But they are a driven driver who has not forgotten that they didn't get anywhere alone. They have
Mm,
not forgotten that other people are supporting them, counting on them, perhaps dependent on them. They haven't forgotten their humanity. And when we're coaching these kinds of people, one of the things that we often focus on is humility. So can they find a way to humble themselves so they realize that they are not this I did it all myself kind of a mindset, because then they're shedding that human element. So yeah, this is a that's I think how what balances it all out. People who are too far outgrid, too far task oriented, need to focus on relationships. People that are too relationship focused need to do a little bit more on their own personal growth, etc., accomplishing. So we can talk about the different dynamics, growth dynamics, in-grid, outgrid, downgrid, upgrid, or PowerPoint maneuvers. If you're in the outgrid danger zone, you want to get to the PowerPoint. It's all about humility. It's all about bringing that sense that others are really how you got to where you are.
And this is just two things. One, I think the individual has humility. I honestly, truly
Yep.
do.
Yep.
But she also is very, very task, and I'm doing it. I have to do it all myself, And
Mm-hmm.
people say, give it up, but she isn't hearing that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've already asked her questions like, well, what would happen if you didn't do it?
Yes, I have.
Because what would happen to her? What would
Yeah.
happen to the situation? And if you find that they have even a moment's hesitation to answer that, then you kind of go, no, they're just pulled into this pattern. That really, they didn't get here by thinking through the situation.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're just.
So another thing I have to ask, and do you know what I mean when I say pocket vetoes?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So would these people in the outgrid tend to have pocket vetoes? Because it seems like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that means they either have sufficient authority or they are usurping sufficient authority to go against whatever has been decided. And so they're kind of vetoing in that way. Now, some of it can be more formal, particularly if you're talking about pocket vetoes. That can happen more at a local kind of level.
Yeah.
But no, they have in their mind that they have the right to decide not to do whatever it is that's.
Without telling anybody.
Oh, no, of course not. No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it becomes more automatic. Okay, so again, we're talking about these. Oops, wait, what did I just do? It should be back. Come on back. So there we are. So we know that they do prefer top shelf alcohol. They do prefer expensive designer drugs. And by the way, whatever drug they take needs to be something that's going to help them feel more empowered, more emboldened. They favor that kind of a thing. Yes, when the addictions get to be severe, they're going to need to take the opposite drug in order to sleep or whatever, and that can add to their overall dysfunction and all the physical consequences of whatever they happen to be doing. But nevertheless, their choice would be something that is stimulating, difficult to get, whatever. They love gambling. They also become very much sex addicts, but they're not addicted to sex itself. They're addicted to what? Power, the control over somebody else. And so they believe that they can and should get away with inappropriate behaviors. And that's why usually in these days, in order for an executive to actually be sufficiently called to task on their behavior, and it leads to some sort of coaching or therapeutic intervention, it's because they've crossed a line. And there is a pending or actual lawsuit that's going on because of sexual misconduct or misappropriation of funds. These are the people who will rearrange money for whatever they're doing, but because they believe they can get away with it. That's also, by the way, a form of gambling. So trying to do whatever bets they can. So do you have a sense about what this energy is all about when it comes to addictions?
Yes.
Yep. Now, let's take a look upgrid. So the upgrid person, this is really more about that expressive energy. And way up here, we'd be talking about an expressive. So that's all about expression for them. They're in the upgrid danger zone. What kind of alcohol do you think they're attracted to?
I'm going to take a guess. Cheap vodka.
Cheap vodka. Interesting. I'll say yes, as long as something else is true. So anybody want to throw out? These are people that are out there living life. They're out there.
I'm thinking rum. I'm thinking party alcohol.
Party. So to Tom's point, they'll drink the cheap stuff as long as it has an umbrella in it. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, because they're there, they want to have the party, they want to be in the life of the party, they want to really do this. Now, again, they're not truly in harm's way, but they're out there. They very much suffer from the fear of missing out, FOMO, and so they want to be part of the in scene. They want to be accepted, so they're very likely to go out there and be the party, be the one with a big pitcher of margaritas that are filling everybody's stuff up. What did I just touch? I just did something else and made my screen disappear. I'm just not going to move anymore. And so that's what's going on with them.
So how does that relate to their perceived low ability?
And the high challenge. What do
Yeah.
you think the person who is out there trying to be the life of the party is actually trying to do? Because remember, I said there's insecurities at all four corners. What's their insecurity?
That they won't be liked.
That they won't be liked. And so to make themselves more likable, more approachable, more memorable, they obviously want everyone to want them or want to be them or want to be near them. There is this kind of charisma on overdrive. Unfortunately, they end up drunk and then they get sloppy and they undo all the charm that they might have had on the way up to that danger zone. But that's really it. They just want to have fun. They want everyone to have fun. But sometimes it gets a little out of control. And then that's where, at the very least, a bad hangover waits for them the next day. But you know what they'll do? They'll get out of bed and be the first one to have a Bloody Mary. So this is very much the mindset of the party person, but they believe that it's necessary to do that. We've had several associates, clients who use humor inappropriately. And so they're like an executive in their actual role, but they're always cracking jokes. They're always, if they have an opportunity to say something funny or witty, no matter how serious the situation is, they want to do that. And if you really look at the pathology that led to that, they were the kid in school who didn't have the looks, the money, the whatever. And so they had to become funny. They had to become the class clown. And now they continue to do it in more serious situations. And you guys know this, if you're in a very serious situation and someone starts cracking jokes and making light of things, are they enhancing or detracting with their credibility? Yeah. So.
Oh boy, it reminds me of one of the funniest men who ever lived, Norm Macdonald.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Ooh.
Yep.
Uncomfortable jokes, very uncomfortable jokes.
Coming out of nowhere.
Hilarious. Coming out of nowhere, all as a way to say, the spotlight hasn't been on me for a couple of minutes now. What can I do to get people's attention back on me? Because they're trying to feel, valid. Again, being expressive is always about feeling stuff, wanting to feel stuff, wanting to share feelings. That's what they're all about. It's all about their limbic system being satisfied more than anything else.
Norm Macdonald was a gambling addict.
Well, not surprising, but the difference is that the Outgrid Danger Zone person gambles because they want to be able to show people that they're in the high stakes room. They want big dollar things, where these people love gambling, but they could be sitting at the penny slot machine, because for them, it's like, how do they turn it into something fun and keep that fun element of it all going? And by the way, they're probably being fed drinks along the way too. So, yeah.
Sounds like in all four spots there, there's a deflection going on, from what's really happening, and you're using these in the most misappropriating physical, mental, and emotional energy.
Right, because again, it's not a problem if they were up here at coordinates 2 and 10. They're still very upgrid. They're still going to be, again, assuming there's no life and death situation, so it's upgrade positive situations. They're going to be the life of the party, but they're going to be appropriate in their engagement. They're going to really be fun, and everyone loves being around them and all that. It's when they go further upgrade that their behaviors start to become problematic, because they're revealing their insecurities. that are there. So you show me someone who's at 2 and 10 and comfortable being there. And I'm going to tell you, this is a person who likes having a good time, doesn't mind trying new things, figures what's the worst that could possibly happen. If I don't have fun, at least I'll learn. Maybe I won't do that again, whatever the case may be. But they're very fun, energized and energizing people. And that's okay. That's okay. And what are they saying to the world? It's kind of like, look, I don't have a whole lot of ability, but why should that stop us from doing something that's really fun? So they'll be the first one out on the dance floor that has no idea how to do the actual dance. Do they care?
Nah.
Nah, they're out there having a good time. They're out there having a good old time. And so that's a good part. We're talking about when it becomes problematic, where they're trying to desperately get some attention or have someone respond positively to them, or what is more often the case, they've got a little bit too much alcohol in them, and they start to behave over the top kinds of ways. And so people will cut them some slack. But if they see a pattern of that happening over and over and over again, they might be hesitant to ask that person to go out clubbing with them again, because it can be embarrassing.
So T,
it's a mess to clean up. Yes.
hey, so where is narcissism? Because it sounds like there's a lot of qualities or characteristics similar to narcissism. So where is narcissism?
There are, but I think that the narcissist believes that it's actually true about them, and these people about the danger zone are just kind of acting as though they're great or they're funny or whatever. So let me just throw this up to remind you. Remember that the 4 danger zones are physically adjacent to one another. So although we say narcissism tends to live in the Outgrid Danger Zone, it's darn close to that Upgrid Danger Zone as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of spillage happening between any of these 4 corners. And when you get to the very center of it, the one word they all have in common is delusional. So how did they get to the delusion? Ends up becoming whatever is driving their position on the grid. So yeah, but truly narcissistic behavior tends to be something that is more about outward behaviors, and the person who is in the Upgrid Danger Zone, it's very internal at that point in time. And again, if they start to be external, it makes you wonder, are they being external or are they just drunk? Right. So, now it's interesting. They also have their issues with sex addiction as well, because again, they want to be the life of the party. They want to do crazy kinds of stuff. They want to share experiences with others. But and by the way, they are the target of the Outgrid Danger Zone's sexual behaviors. So this is the one who wants to conquer. This is the conquest. Who do you think is wearing the skimpiest outfits at the bar? You think it's someone who's down in apathy? You think it's the person very far amiable on the very far thing? No, that's an expressive thing. Clothing is one of the biggest ways that someone's personality is expressed. And so here you've got this person very far out grid going like, well, if I'm going to go out there and conquer somebody, I can't conquer just anybody. I need to conquer who? I need the one that everybody else wants but can't have. And so that's these 2 get along very well with each other. Unfortunately, these 2 together do not a solid relationship make. So it's all going to be very
well for a while.
Yeah, well,
you always hear sex was good.
Let's say the hour is going to pass one way or another. So, so there it is. There it is. Okay, now, so let's kind of work our way around just to finish some of the others. But, oh, by the way, they're also addicted to thrills. Usually, you see how this red circle doesn't go all the way to the edge?
Yeah.
It's just our way of saying there's some danger anytime someone thinks that they're facing a challenge of a 12. I don't care how you rate your ability. If you think something's a challenge of a 12, there's a good chance that you have misdiagnosed, you have misassessed whatever is really going on. But nevertheless, holding that's going to trigger that behavior. And as Brian pointed out, there are some neurochemical things that are going on right here as well. And so, yeah, there's plenty of endorphins. But what about the adrenaline rush that's going on. The thrill seekers want that drug of adrenaline. They want that dopamine. They want whatever it is that's bringing them that. And even Upgrid, the reason why this individual is more than happy to deal with a hangover is because of the dopamine surge that they experienced while it was all fun. You know, everything's fun till the cops arrive, right? So this is where they're all at. So, okay, you guys get the idea, get the pattern?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just did it again. What am I touching?
And we don't even want to know.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, you know what I think it is? I think that the where I have to plug in my connection to my big screen, I think that little outlet or whatever you call port has got problems, because if I wiggle it the wrong way, it loses it. So it's like you just have to remain motionless if you want things to stay the way you want them to stay. Okay, let's go Downgrid for a second, because Downgrid, I think, are probably the most common of all. So Downgrid people, whatever their situations are, whatever their life in general is all about, they believe they've got a tremendously solid level of ability to handle it, and it's not really all that challenging anyway. So here they are: Downgrid, power apathy, even apathy, Downgrid awareness, not feeling any threat, no puzzles, going from one day to the next, to the next, to the next. What do you think their drug of choice is?
Do they have one?
Beer.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Beer.
Well, beer would be the alcohol of choice. You're absolutely right. Beer would be the alcohol of choice.
So something that's common to everyone.
Marijuana?
Very common. This
Marijuana.
is marijuana.
Ah, okay.
So, and
Yeah.
remember, marijuana is a central nervous system depressant overall.
Right.
So it's just going to help them mellow out even more. And so it kind of supports their Downgrid energy, just because of the effect the drug happens to have, where cocaine is likely to embolden somebody. And oh, by the way, Upgrid, this is designer drugs. These are the party drugs. So ecstasy, things like that. They want to experience it just so they can experience it. So party drugs that they think they can't get addicted to, and maybe there's not the physical addictive properties that cocaine would have, but there's nevertheless psychologically addictive properties to a lot of those, pharmaceutical sorts of concoctions. Anyway, but down here, yeah, this is pot, this is beer. What are their behaviors of choice? This is where gluttony lives. And so
really?
they tend to become addicted to foods. And addicted is a strange thing to say. They just have very strong problems with managing their weight, food, etc. Keep in mind, the further you are upgrid and outgrid, the more you are likely to have lower body weight. And if you're ingrid and downgrid, you tend to have higher body weight, if you're looking at things at a behavioral kind of a level or whatever the case may be. And you should be able, by the way, all of you should be able to explain from a tension management perspective why that's the case. So why are people Downgrid more likely to get fat?
They don't move much.
They don't move much. So,
Yeah.
what are they going to do while they're binge watching Netflix? Oh, by the way, they also tend to get addicted to video games. Even if the video game is one of those first person shooters where they got to pay attention to everything happening all at once, don't think that moves them up to being a driver or even an expressive. It might move them up to being a driven analytical, but that energy is not going to continue after the game is finished being played. All right, now that leaves us with these individuals on the in-grid side of things. So the in-grid person, this is an amiable. I'll give you this as one hint. One of their greatest driving forces is that they do nothing that will draw attention to them. They don't do anything outside of the boundaries of what is considered socially acceptable. So what's their alcohol of choice?
None.
Tea, chamomile tea.
Wine?
Well, yeah, alcohol wise, they might be wine. They might, I don't know if it's just, I got to stop moving my cursor. They might be drinking that, but again, socially acceptable. I do like the idea about tea, but tea is a stimulant. So
This is not chamomile.
yeah, it depends which ones they choose, right? Yeah. But anyway,
Well, sorry.
no, you're right. They want the martini, but only after 5 o'clock.
And only
And then only a small one, but then they'll have another small one. Or they're the ones that will go and have the small glass of wine that grows to the bigger glass of wine. Whatever it is they're doing has to be socially acceptable. And so, at least on the surface, it all has to look like, they're carrying themselves the way that they should properly be carrying themselves. And so they'll have the drink, but the drink, it leads to another one. What about drugs? By the way, they have more of a problem with the drugs than they have with alcohol. What drugs, though, do they take? Again, it's got to be socially acceptable.
Antidepressants?
They may very well be taking antidepressants.
Up or downers?
Right.
ibuprofen.
Well, they could be taking ibuprofen, but if they want to alter their state, they're going to take drugs that came to them through one specific avenue.
A doctor.
A doctor. They only take legally prescribed medications, but they will go to multiple doctors and get the same prescription from multiple doctors. They can always say, I'm just taking what my doctor told me to take. And so tranquilizers could be it, any kind of, not just antidepressant. What category of drug is something like, Valium? Where's Valium fall into the chain of things? It's a painkiller. It's whatever. Wait. It's got to be legally prescribed. And by the way, they might mix things. They might have that one martini with a Valium. Do you have any idea how deadly the combination of one martini and one Valium could actually be?
Could it actually hurt somebody?
It could actually hurt someone. Those are both central nervous system depressants.
Yeah.
And they are synergistic in the way that they work. And so, at Poison Control, we used to get people saying she only had one drink and then she took a sleeping pill and now we can't wake her up at all. Well, why are we talking? So
it all depends on the size of the dose.
It just depends on the size of the dose. It also depends on the size of the human.
Sure. Yep. And their individual metabolism.
Exactly. But the point is that no one would ever, they would never want to be labeled as having a drinking problem or a drug problem, because they can always say, well, I never drink till I'll have one drink after 5 o'clock, or I might have a little cocktail before bedtime. I might have the gin and tonic before dinner. That it's got to be socially acceptable, but just because it's socially acceptable or legally prescribed doesn't mean that it can't become problematic.
Of course.
Yeah. So, but that's what they're going. And when it comes to processes they get addicted to, these are the ones that get addicted to caring about other people. So how many of you know parents who take their parenting to an extreme? So the kids might be 30 or 40 years old, and nevertheless, mom is still treating them like they're in grade school.
Yes.
Whatever, constantly bailing the kids out, constantly sacrificing for someone else. Why would they do that?
It's a good question.
Because they want to appear to be nobler.
That helps them be nobler. They define themselves as mom, or they define themselves as that helper role, whatever that may manifest itself as being. But nevertheless, that's where they put themselves. And so they need that to continue, because when you take that away from them, like I guess this empty nest syndrome is a very real thing for some parents. The kids are grown and gone, and now they got this big house with nobody in it. And so what they've actually lost is not so much their children as much as they've lost what they've defined themselves by for so long.
They become a corporate prisoner.
Yes, they become, exactly right. They become that kind of prisoner.
Which is why you hear about people getting divorced after 30 years, 25, 30 years, and you always say, why? What's the point of this? Well, children left, they turn, look at each other and go, you know something, all these years I really dislike you, but I could diffuse it with our kids.
Right. Or we all of our lives were so focused on parenting that we forgot to grow as a couple. And so now the kids are gone. We've got nothing in common,
Hey,
you
would
know?
this be where you find Munchausen by proxy?
Munchausen by proxy is a very much in-grid kind of a behavior. Um, and so, and again, if we look at the back map, oh my God, for Christmas, I want a port that works. Um, okay, Munchausen by proxy is caring for something so deeply that you actually create the need for you to take care of that person, and usually it manifests itself in medical conditions. But there's also other ways that you can do it. You can convince a sane person they're insane. They'll never be able to do something. If I squash your individuality, if I squash your self-esteem long enough, you're not going to have it anymore. And even that is a form of Munchausen by proxy. But usually
This
in the
is
literature, they're
interesting.
just talking about medical things. You guys are all familiar with Munchausen by proxy, yes?
Yes.
Yep. So if you aren't, I would tell you to watch the movie Sixth Sense, one of the best movies ever produced, The Sixth Sense.
It was excellent.
Excellent movie. And there's a demonstration in there of a Munchausen by proxy situation.
So T, this if Ingrid uh take drugs by choice, they would be most likely to not fight that choice when they're prescribed, whereas someone Outgrid or even Ingrid might if they're prescribed it. So I'm thinking like when you
Well,
talk about like I'm hearing Valium, that's a benzodiazepine, which is basically a tranquilizer, right?
yep, absolutely.
So
Right.
someone outgrid or downgrid, they might say, well, I'm not going to take that kind of stuff or something like that. It
Well,
depends,
even
right?
if you start looking at compliance, someone who is upgrid, outgrid, or downgrid is far less to be compliant with medical instruction than an ingrid person would.
Mm,
So they're the ones who watch all those commercials that are advertising different medications. They're the ones that'll actually go in and have a discussion with their doctor about whatever the three-letter alphabet drug is that they're currently
I
looking.
give them props for being able to keep track of them. Maybe they can write the names down.
You go in like, doc, I need the purple pill.
yeah, right,
No,
right.
I need the whatever. And the thing is that
That's what your wife was telling me last night.
we're probably the most medicated society on the planet. And is that because the doctors are always going like, if you want a pill, I'll give you a pill. Where you go to the Netherlands and you're lucky if they'll give you a Tylenol. So yeah, they want to know, is this pain really bad enough that you need to take something, or do you just need to cowboy up?
Right.
Well, yeah, so different cultures have different attitudes about medications. In the US, we tend to be over medicated and we're getting it from somewhere. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to give somebody a prescription. So, yeah,
Not so much anymore.
not so much anymore. Well, even if you think about the whole oxycodone situation, I forget the two brothers that started this chain of little
Sackler.
pain clinics. Who was that?
The Sackler brothers?
Yeah. And so they operate these little clinics everywhere. I don't know how they were making their money because they were charging for whatever the office visit happened to be, and on and on. But it's like, this is the whole thing. If you can make money by giving someone a pill, this is what I've always wondered in the world of pharmaceutical sales. Do you get a commission from the doctor? Does the doctor get paid every time they prescribe your medication? I believe the answer is no, they do not.
I thought they did.
No.
No.
No, they don't get that. They don't get paid that at all. What they do is they get the perks like the tickets to see the NBA finals or
That's a way of
that sort of
payment.
thing.
That's a
Well,
form
what's
of
that?
payment.
Yep. It's a kickback that they can get in trouble for, heaps
Yep.
of trouble
They can
for.
get a kickback, they get kickbacks, but they do not get paid to prescribe any specific medication.
No, that would be illegal.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how you wonder. So these people that sell pharmaceuticals, they're going to doctors' offices, and the doctor has really no incentive to change whatever and that's supposed to be the right thing. If the doctor is going to use the medications because the doctor is convinced that that medication is the right thing for their patients.
Right.
And that's how it's supposed to be.
It's Europe and Hawaii and all expense. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, perks and parties and all that sort of stuff. And that is, it's obviously a gray area, but that seems to be how they go about doing things.
You
All right,
can definitely ask Dr. Diane about that. She has firsthand experience.
oh, that's right. Absolutely right. We should
Mhm.
get her on these calls. Okay, so we're over time, but if you guys are finding this interesting, again, I'm always happy to continue to give you more.
Fascinating. It's
I just want you
fascinating.
to see that we can use the ChangeGrid very effectively. In fact, if we've always said when people go like, well, what is this thing? And we say to them that the ChangeGrid is the world's only client-driven, activity-specific coaching and management tool. And
That's
we've
how
been
I
up for a long time. We've never seen anybody else do anything that's even akin to what we've done with this tool. So we know that. And people are like, well, what's it do? We say it is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So when we look at someone's change grid, we can tell you and them a whole lot about what's going on with their thoughts and their behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very descriptive. It's also very predictive. I can tell you based on where you are on the change grid, how you might be thinking and acting in the not too distant future or in the long term. I can see the patterns. I know how the energies end up unfolding. But the third one is it's prescriptive. Based on where you are on the change grid, we can tell you exactly how to get yourself to where you want to be or to the center of the change grid if you're just trying to have a more peaceful, harmonious kind of life. So I hope you guys, as we start talking about these things like drugs of choice and behaviors of choice and the danger zones, that this is just giving you a greater appreciation, if you will, for the full range of human behaviors that the change grid can describe or can incorporate. We say there's a place in the change grid for every behavior, no matter how horrible, how stupid, or whatever the behavior is. I can tell you where it exists on the change grid. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
What do you call that other layer, T? What was that other layer?
which layer? This one where we're talking about where the four danger zones come together?
Yes, what is this layer?
Yeah, we don't actually, technically, it's not a layer because it can only be how this diagram comes to be is you have to conceptually, or you have to, in your mind's eye, print out the change grid on a piece of fabric and then lay that piece of fabric on top of a ball in such a way that all four corners of it fall to the bottom. And then when you pull those four corners together, this is what it ends up looking like. So
Okay.
if the center of the change grid is the North Pole, think of what you're looking at here as being those four danger zones coming together at the South Pole of what's going on. This is the dark side of humanity. Everything inside of these four danger zones, this is the dark side of human behavior, dark side of human thought.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, that's how it all came to be. Yeah.
Damn, that went fast.
Yeah, it
Did it?
did.
It used to go really slowly.
Norm.
But hey, we're getting into the deepest layers of the change grid, and so usually the deeper layers are just talking about stuff we talked about on other layers, and in just kind of from a different angle. I can tell you the vast majority of time that we're reading change grids, we're talking about 5 levels of tension. So we're talking about that. Sometimes, maybe sometimes we'll talk about energies that someone's experiencing. I'm upgrade now because my screen just did that thing again. All I want for Christmas is a reliable monitor. So maybe we'll talk about this layer sometimes. And if we're talking to a company, we'll talk about engagement. All the rest of these layers, all the rest of this content is something that I want people who like tension management, people who like to think about. In fact, I'll tell you this. When I first started putting this together long ago, one of the things that I recognized about myself is this. I am the kind of person who has always been fascinated by people who are fascinated by people. I don't find people themselves all that interesting, but people who are fascinated by people tend to create their own versions of these maps of humanity. They try to come up with some way of organizing and describing humanity from whatever angle for whatever purpose they had in mind. I'm fascinated by those people and the maps they came up with. And so, yeah, Brian, there are a lot of layers that we never even look at, but that do exist from all the work we've done over all these years. But that one particular is not technically a layer. It's when you turn what looks like a two-dimensional diagram into its full 3 dimensions. And the change grid can take the shape of a sphere. It can take the shape of a tube, and it can also take the shape of a cube, depending on what it is we're trying to do.
That's good. But I think what's most helpful for me, and I haven't gone through this already, is this idea. I call it bringing it to life. So talking about these life situations and the different ways of application. Because like yourself, I'm fascinated with humanity's behavior and why people, what are the barriers that you often mention? What are the barriers that keep people from doing X?
Right.
Kind of like, what are the barriers that are keeping people from being healthy, although we have all this predictive medical technology out and people still aren't living healthier? Those kinds of things really fascinate me. So when we talk about these kinds of life situations, I always leave with some nuggets that I'm looking to readily apply.
Excellent.
Like when we talk about drugs of choice and those kinds of things, and the prescriptive, the predictive and descriptive, it's like, okay, yeah, I have something else I can look at now in terms of human behaviors as I come across them and interact with different cultures around the world.
That's right. That's right.
Can I ask a
Will you put up number 9 again?
Number 9, the energies. Yes.
Yeah, the energies. Thanks.
Yeah, these are our 16 energies, although there's 169 different spots on the change grid, and each of them have slightly different energy than any of the other its neighbors. But from a practical perspective, we tend to just talk about these 16 and maybe the borders between them, things like that.
Yeah.
Ask a question.
Please.
Who would you think is most likely to turn to religious zealotry?
Maybe
Religious
zealotry.
Fiction or
well, let's talk about religion, but let's make it distinct from people's faith. So I want to talk about religion as a construct. So something that has been basically invented for whatever reasons it was invented. So as we talk about this, we're not talking about whether there is or isn't a God and whether people's spiritual beliefs are or are not valid, worthwhile, whatever the case may be. So we just want to say, no, somewhere along the line, religion got organized. And so we talk about the way that religion has been structured as a product to somehow or another put out there in the marketplace. Now we can see a lot of things around it. So first of all, what energy do you think creates religions? Is it the driver, the expressive, the amiable, or the analytical?
Driver.
Okay, the driver is going to go there and create churches. They're going to create religious movements, things like that. Why would they be doing that? Why do people create churches?
Maybe power.
Power. Okay, that's driven driver. Why else might they do it?
And inculcate you in their ideas.
Yep, they inculcate you into their ideas, so they're developing that following. Why else would they do it? Why do people build
to be
churches?
the authority?
They like people.
They like people. Now we're being on the noble side. Thank you. That's more of an amiable driver, because there are plenty of churches out there that really are quite noble in their approaches. But when I turn on the TV and I see a presentation with an audience of 10,000 people and constant requests for money to be donated, etc., what is this now? It becomes a business.
Yeah.
Enterprise. And so we have to go like, well, whoever is driving those things, that's definitely an outgrid behavior. But if you want to speak to the need for someone to have religion, a good religion is going to do four things. It's going to offer you they're going to offer you all four maneuvers. So for people who are too far upgrid and are very much afraid and worried about what the future may hold, religion gives them messages of hope. They give them a way of it's so hope. You don't need to be up there feeling as though disaster is awaiting you. We can give you hope. For people that are too far in grid, that feel as though they're being held back and suppressed and all that sort of thing, and maybe it's literally happening in their world, religion gives them courage to step out there and do what's going on. If you're too far down grid, everything's becoming too commonplace. Religion can give you a sense of mission, vision, purpose, etc. And if you're too far out grid, the danger zone, then religion brings you a message of humility. So if you look at what the four main mechanisms are of religion, you'll see they all map to the ChangeGrid maneuvers. And if you really did do them all and did them all well, you'd end up in the center of the ChangeGrid. And so basically, religion started as a way to explain that which was not understood. And so long ago, fire, no one knew what fire was. So they attributed it to some supernatural force. They didn't understand the winds. They didn't understand whatever else was going on as far as phenomenons go. And they're scattered all over the planet. So there will simultaneously additional explanations being put together at different parts of the world. And so sooner or later, these things came to be attributed to specific gods. And then someone said, well, we could be making some money here. So it's gods that need to be worshiped, gods that need to be taken care of. So people need to give food. Oh, look, we can create a whole job for ourselves where people are going to give us free stuff as long as we keep them convinced that that's their way to salvation. That's their way to whatever it is, peace, harmony, joy, whatever it is. So can you kind of feel that religion as a construct ends up becoming something that is profoundly manipulative in its nature, and someone is running that whole dynamic. Yeah.
Yes, institutional perceptions, I call them.
Right.
I would think that becomes something that drives you inward, inside yourself.
It can, but again, it all depends on the motivations of whoever is in the driver's seat of this thing. To Anja's point, talking about religious zealots, if they are a person who genuinely holds these religious beliefs so deep that they've been indoctrinated to that point where they are no longer even asking questions about that faith or whatever, you're talking about someone who probably would benefit from some sort of counseling. Because what they're basically doing is sacrificing all their own power to a greater being, in which now they're subordinating themselves and doing all sorts of things. So, in fact, I don't mind telling you that my trainer's father passed away a few years ago. His mother has always been Catholic to the 10th power, and the insurance money that she had, somehow or another, someone from the church told her that the greatest thing she could do to make sure that her husband was going to be enjoying heaven would be to make a donation of that money to the church. Okay, so right there, you just kind of go like, what? So I think there's zealots there, but I do think that the real religious zealots may very well be trying to manipulate other people.
Yeah,
so that's what you
got to look at.
Yeah,
isn't it like a cult?
Well, yeah, cults are forms of religion, so they are constructs.
But sometimes they're used to overcome addictions. Sometimes people leave one addiction and go to the religious addiction, and
you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, even if you look at something like Alcoholics Anonymous, things like that, oftentimes people will replace one addiction with another addiction. but
Right.
hopefully it's an addiction that isn't as problematic. So alcoholism has a lot of damage that gets done to someone's own body, to their families, to that sort of a thing. But if you meet someone who says, I have to go to a meeting every morning and every afternoon, 7 days a week in order to do that, they might need to have done that in the short run as they were going through whatever the physical parts of the addiction happens to be. But can you also hear that there is a potential for becoming addicted to recovery?
Exactly.
You know, so and I don't, you know, that's not my area of expertise, but I can certainly see how that could be a possibility if
Quite
somebody,
interesting.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fascinating.
They tend to be people who won't discuss it too. Like if you ask questions, they don't want to, they don't want to talk, you know, and not confronting, just asking questions.
right, yeah,
To not want to discuss it. And
right, because for so many of them, and again, this is where we talk about the positive aspects of those types of interventions, is that it's the thing that saved their life.
right, right.
And so, you know, they always want to hold it in great esteem because of the power that they have given it, although they
Mm,
think that it gave them the power.
mm,
So, and
Right.
some people get stuck there, and I'm not, you know, I'm not going to judge whether that's good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is. And so,
Steve, we have
but
a
other
friend.
people go on from it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have a friend at the gym where we work out. He's 65. He's a recovered drug addict, alcoholic,
Yeah.
and he's very, very religious. And so he's been studying it for 20 years. So I thought we could have a philosophical and even theological and even historical discussion of things like why the Old Testament is all in Hebrew and the New Testament is all in Aramaic. I'm sorry, is all written in Greek.
Yeah.
And he just shut down completely. Now, I don't want to talk about any of that. Jesus is my Lord. I
Yeah.
don't
And so that,
know.
yeah, so
Yeah.
they're basically telling you where they're at,
Yep.
and you know, and I do my best to always just you know, honor whatever their beliefs happen to be. Obviously, if it's working for them, it's working for them, and I hope that continues to work well for them. But when they start to take those beliefs and now impose them on other people, or they take those beliefs and try to get those beliefs to make changes in other areas of our lives that we don't agree with or whatever, that's when you have to say no. This is
Right.
about your personal relationship with your God.
We
Keep
just
it
find it
personal.
fascinating to discuss it. You know, these things
All
are
right. No, there's
fascinating.
well, and Ajay, also appreciate that they may not have done the level of study that you've done. You know, they may simply not be able to answer questions because they didn't know that the New Testament was written in Greek and the Old Testament was.
Well, then where the hell do we go to have a good conversation about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are people out there that would love to have those kinds of conversations, but you know, in the world of coaching, we had to accept from the very beginning we have to meet people where they are.
mm.
And
Right,
a
right.
great deal of people are at a place that most people would not even imagine one could be until you've spent years working with those people. You go like, oh no, there's a lot of people there. So
It's so disappointing.
yeah, it is, but you know, then you go, you just need to seek out people that are able to have really interesting conversations about things that a lot, you know, like the circle of brilliance. I mean, it really is.
Mhm.
I mean, I like to think we talk about stuff that's very useful and you know, all that. I hope that's what's happening. But I think one of the biggest reasons why people come to the circle of brilliance is because they like to be around people who are okay thinking and talking about thoughts and having some different angles or vantage points through which they process things. So it's
Yeah,
almost like it's more of a social kind of a thing than it is an educational kind of thing. Do you guys
right.
agree with that? Those that are on the circle?
Absolutely. In a non-judgmental way,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Of
know.
course, of course.
We're just people who like to think about thinking.
So maybe
Yeah.
Anja and Tom start that kind of group that talk about that kind of stuff because I had such a, you know, I've lived around the world and grew up in part Jewish, part Christian, and I think they have some advantages and some disadvantages. But I even learned on the Jewish side to cite the Seder prayer
Right.
The
Yeah,
whole deal. So I talk about those kinds of things, but only with people that are of the same mind, because then they're not going to judge it and there's no pushback on it. And that becomes important.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Well,
found in my life talking to Jews, it's much more easy to get into a philosophical discussion.
Well, because in the way that they're even raised, trained, or whatever, they're trained to use their intellect when looking at things, as opposed to, you know, fearing hellfire and brimstone.
Yeah.
And so how did we come to that religion or whatever? But just to finish off to on just a point, we have to always remember that the population is not in a healthy place on the change grid. And as years go by, it's getting worse and worse.
That's
So,
what I'm
and we
saying.
have people who have, because of people that are in the Outgrid Danger Zone or drivers with their own agendas and whatever, and because of social media being able to broadcast these things far and wide, we don't really have much of a population of people who are okay just thinking and just, you know, accepting everyone where they are and trying to talk to one another to figure out how they are all came to the beliefs they have, why they hold those beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. We have to be in the center of the change grid to allow that to happen. And that's where we get into Tim's area of expertise. This is why, if you want to have anything in the DEI space, you have to recognize that you're first searching for common ground. And once you have that common ground, so you know that everyone are good people, their hearts are in the right place, they're respectful of one another. Once you know you've got that, now you can start talking about more sensitive issues to learn from one another. And not necessarily try to convince anybody of anything other than what they hold near and dear, but at least be able to ask so you can understand.
Right, right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone way over, but if you guys ever want to do a deep dive into religion, I'm more than happy to say let's look at religion on the change grid. And again, all of you are welcome to be on the Circle of Brilliance calls. So at the same time, it's just Tuesdays and Thursdays. And right now, we're talking about personality types based on the Greek alphabet. So are you an alpha, a beta, a gamma, delta, omega, or sigma? And so that's what we're talking about right now. So it's pretty interesting to see how that model actually overlays on the change grid. Okay, so with that, thanks everybody. Take care. We'll talk again very soon.
Thank you so much. This has
Thanks, T.
been really interesting.
I'm glad you've enjoyed
Thanks
it.
to all the other people who are here.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks everybody.
True,
Bye.
true, true. Bye.